Can we see the Twitch chat?
Yes, we can, because we are live right now. Hello and welcome to this week's episode of the Weekly Rewind. I'm your host, John Campbell, and I'm also the director of content at comicbookcurious.com. I have two of our very charming writers with us this week. Mike Gergoni is here.
That's me.
Yes, it is. Welcome to the show for the first time. Well, I have different people this week. And also with us, do we have to salute you with your rank? I never know how this works.
No, a salute is not required. Appreciated, but not required.
Captain Chris is with us.
Hi.
How are you guys doing on this Saturday evening?
Doing great. Had some chicken with some Old Bay on it, and I'm ready to talk about this, that, and the other.
All right.
I have played Dungeons and Dragons, and that means I'm willing to talk to other humans now.
There you go. Okay.
Well, and it helps that we'll just kick things right off by having you roll right into talking about Dungeons and Dragons, Mike.
Oh,
good. Yeah, you wrote an article this week about creating basically the character of Venom in a D&D game. Is that correct?
That is correct. It was something I promised out of last week's article or the week prior's article about
you had talked about
characters who are flavored like Venom, but not necessarily Venom at their core, you know?
And also
not got it. Okay.
Yeah. Not copyright infringing either.
To some. Not very specifically avoiding copyright infringement, yes.
In a court of law, you can prove it's not Venom.
Legally distinct, not Venom.
But talk about how you did this, because this was a little bit more involved than the average article that anyone's writing. You brought in some of the people from your D&D podcast, which is Material Components, soon to be heard on the Comic Book Curious Network.
Oh, so soon. Yes, indeed. Brought over good friends Elliot Lewis and Olivia Gray because they have a weird fixation on ooze monsters. Let's just leave it at that and say that when I pitched the idea of making a class that was indicative of these goo monsters, they perked up and said, tell me more. And I said, I can't because it's not a thing yet. Will you help me make it a thing? And then you can tell everyone more. And that's how that conversation started.
Knowing both of them, I know they jumped at the chance to do that.
Yes. So we spent a Saturday night knocking our heads together and basically hammering out what is it about the character of Venom that people find evocative or telling, or like the signature moves, I guess, and how to distill that into 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons.
And how did you feel that went?
Yeah, John asked, having no idea if what I did was successful or not.
Well, I read the article, but to be fair, I'm not a D&D player of any sort, so I don't, but it was sufficiently detailed. I'm an outsider to this world.
Yes. To someone like you, John, that article would be so much technobabble. It is getting a reverse socket into the dilithium crystals to eject the warp core. So
now he's talking my language.
Right.
If you're gonna put it in Star Trek speak, now I know exactly what you're talking about. Now,
you just need some self-stealing stem bolts. Right.
But no, the trick with this whole process was the fact that you're trying to make a fictional character from another universe fit mechanically into a rule set for a game. So whether that be a video game, a board game, or Dungeons and Dragons, you have to work within the limitations of those rule sets. So when you see a character like Venom have a big nasty goo tentacle come out of his arm, and that's like that's what you want to see out of a symbiote, right? Is a big nasty goo tentacle.
Sure.
How do you translate?
Why do you think those movies make so much money? It's all about the goo tentacles, man.
I think it has awakened something in the box office that they're not quite ready to confront, but it's there.
it's spoken to something that's been laying in the American pop culture consciousness for a while, and it's just had an excuse to come out now.
Right, exactly. So I think it went well. I think the thing we ended up creating, which is a custom character class called the Lethal Protector, because those two words aren't copywritten in any way, shape, or form, but they are perhaps familiar.
Yes, they do evoke some memories from the 90s.
And yeah, we tried to make something that was a big, nasty brawler type character class, much like a barbarian or a fighter, who relies on their charisma as opposed to their strength or constitution, as to like kind of reflect the actual character dynamic of like it's your personality and your strength with your symbiote that makes you powerful. It's not your actual physical prowess. Like something we noted in the second Venom movie is anytime Eddie Brock doesn't have Venom running around, he's getting his ass handed to him.
Certainly. Now, I think this has become an interesting track for you to go down. 2 articles in a row glomming Venom onto D&D, because I know you're not particularly a fan of the cinematic Venom, let's say. Chris, I don't know. Have you seen the Venom movies, Chris?
I haven't seen the new Carnage one, mostly because
Let There Be Carnage.
I hadn't heard the best reviews of it. But I did see. When did that come out? 2018, maybe.
Yeah, I think it was 18. Yeah.
That Venom.
2018 cinematic classic Venom.
Yeah, not a huge fan of that one. I'm kind of in the mode of like, you have a space monster alien that doesn't understand the sanctity of human life going around eating people. Maybe this movie isn't for kids. So like you can feel free to Deadpool it up. Movies that are about subjects like horrible, deplorable violence and eating people's faces. Like, you know what? I don't necessarily need to see a guy's face get ripped off. But at the same time, so sort of like,
I was going to say, Chris, having read a lot of your pieces about slasher movies, I'm surprised to hear you don't need to see a guy's face.
I don't need to see it, mostly because I am completely inundated with faces being ripped off. But like, I was sort of like, it would be nice to be invited to the face being ripped off party. And I definitely can see the value of putting some R ratings into your superhero movie. Logan, Deadpool, like I see the value of that. And so I was kind of thinking, oh, well, let's have this Venom movie be a little more visceral. And it kind of wasn't. And I was like, oh, well, all right. You can be the Aliens versus Predator then, and get in your one F-bomb, but have but then be real scaled down, and then have me go,
when what you really want is Alien versus Predator Requiem, right?
Well, I don't want that either, because that movie was so horrible that the editor just went, yeah, I'm just going to go ahead and do this to the movie. Now that you can't see the movie, much improved. Not a great sign when someone goes, would really improve this viewing experience, not seeing it.
Yeah.
There we go. Way better.
Alien versus...
Oh my God, it's such an improvement.
Alien versus Predator still has so much potential. Well, I think really both the franchises have...
But I'm kind of done with them for right now. I'm good.
I'm a little done with both franchises at this point. Yeah. I think they've both, they're going to have to do a lot to lure me back. Chris,
yes, John, to answer your question, I do not like those movies.
But to agree with Mike, I do think, and I guess John as well, I think that there is potential there. It's just not capitalized very well. Where it could be, and it has shown that you can do that with doing an R-rated comic book movie. Sure. Because it's not like we're all 14 sitting in here right now, right? Right?
No,
physically, if not emotionally.
Sure, but like, it's not. Not everything needs to be necessarily for kids and be.
Oh no, right, exactly.
And be tilted like that, because then it just gets static and boring, and you're walled off creatively, and you can't tell a story in a way that might be more engaging or more memorable.
And I think that's interesting, because I think it goes both ways. It does feel like the success of movies like Logan and Deadpool has made everybody go, well, maybe we should make everything kind of R-rated. You're like, well, not every character needs
Shazam
R-rated.
Does not need an R rating.
Right.
I really liked Shazam, even though I'm not into have kids do kid stuff in a movie, because the ending is like, hey, it's a whole bunch of kids and we're all hanging around. I'm like, nah. But the rest of it, great. Him trying to discover his powers and like YouTubing it up and everything. Perfect. I don't need, a guy getting his face peeled off in Shazam. I don't need that. That's not where you put your face peelings. But put your face peelings in Venom. Like, this is thing.
You've got to dish out your face peelings with some thought behind it.
I kind of want turkey and stuffing for Thanksgiving. I don't really need that in like the middle of July at a cookout.
Fair. My favorite Venom probably would fit into more of a PG-13, and that's the true Venom, Flash Thompson. But that's neither here nor there.
Was going to come up. I knew Agent Venom or Venom Space Knight was going to come up. Oh, Lady Kristen says in our chat, put your face peelings in Venom. So agreeing with you, Chris.
That's what I'm talking about.
Oh, quote of the day. Yes, quote of the day. Yeah. Put your face peelings in Venom.
Like a fine zested lemon.
Yes. Not everything needs a lemon zest, but sometimes.
It's sort of on a similar topic of things adjacent to face peelings. Chris, you wrote a piece this week about the Friday the 13th video game.
Yes.
Which I know you've also been streaming on our Twitch channel.
Yes. Friday the 13th video game is excellent. I have been playing that game almost for like 4 years, maybe more. It's a game I've put endless hours into. And it's a game sometimes, before I was on Comic Book Curious, I used to stream it and be on my exercise bike. So it's a great game to exercise while you're also playing a game, because I can do this with my hands and my legs can keep, going all crazy.
Yes. Yep.
Run for your life while you run for your life.
Yeah. Before that, that was the game I would play to warm up to go for a run. So I'd go for a 5K and I'd play some Friday the 13th beforehand. It is a game made by creators that loved the series and went out of their way to pull in all these different companies together, because Friday the 13th is not owned by one company. It's owned all over the place. The rights are all crazy. It's a huge, just Gordian knot of nonsense. And they worked hard to get the details right, to get the feeling right, to get all these people on board with it. And even though when it released, it was super glitchy, they went back and put work into it, even though they weren't getting any money out of it. And they realized that the player base wasn't strong. And there were a lot of the player base for a while, wasn't really solid. So they said, okay, we're just going to make it free. And it was like, okay, and that's when I picked it up. And they added content and maps and new characters and all kinds of crazy stuff. And well past the point when they knew they would lose the rights, because they don't have the rights to that game anymore. They can't do any more updates. And they're still like, we love the property enough to continue updating right until the point where we can't. And I was like, perfect. Whatever you make, Gun Media, I will buy from now on. Because if you put the same level of craft into that you put into Friday the 13th, I'm in.
And the thing I love about that is that's considerably more craft than probably went into the making of a lot of Friday the 13th movies.
I'm looking at you, part two.
Yeah. Well, I mean, look, I similar to you, Chris, I'm a big fan of the slasher genre, but I will say they're not all gems. I enjoy each of them for various reasons, but you can tell when there are people with maybe more interest in them than others, the passion for it.
A while ago, I also wrote an article about where to start with those games. I would start. I'm sorry, not the games. The movies. Start with the movies. Start with the fourth one. While it's called the final chapter, it has a tight 2-minute recap of the first 3 movies at the beginning.
Yes.
And then the movie itself is very contained. Corey Feldman's in it, and he's great as a little kid.
He's wonderful.
There's Crispin Glover.
Feldman. Yo, Crispin Glover. And he is Crispin Glovering it all up, all over the place in that movie. Oh,
you actually care about the people that are in it. Tom Savini came back to do the special effects, although he was tricked into thinking that this would be the last one of these. It's not.
We had yet to establish the rule that the final chapter was not the final chapter at this point in cinema.
The 4th of 10th-ish. Like, it's like, or 12th.
Well, look, eventually Jason needed to go to space, okay?
Yes, and then he needed to be replaced by a guy named Roy at one point, who wasn't Jason at all, just cosplaying as Jason.
Oh, nothing better than the Jason fake out. Because they killed his son, man.
Because he wanted a chocolate bar.
Yeah. Also,
4 has Jason costume.
4 has an absolutely memorable Jason death in it too. My God, the way Jason goes out in that movie. Yeah, no, that one felt like somebody was actually trying to make a movie for once.
Yeah,
believe it or not.
They got the guy who did the stunts from. They got the guy who did the stunts from Creature from the Black Lagoon to be Jason. He was almost 60 when he was Jason.
Still
it's solid.
great.
It's a solid movie.
I was gonna say, because before that you had Part 3D, which is about as goofy as it gets.
It's a lot of we don't know what to do with 3D. It's the same difference between if you've ever went to Disneyland and saw Captain EO, and it's got all the stuff flying at the screen, and you're like, wow, I can reach out and touch that asteroid. That's Part 3. It's the, hey, I've got a yo-yo and it's coming towards you. Hey, there's popcorn flying around. As opposed to How to Train Your Dragon, which if you never saw that in 3D is just traumatizingly good in 3D because it feels like it's such a window. And when those POVs of him on the dragon, you're like grabbing your seat like, it feels like it.
It's the animated movies that use the 3D the best of anything in my experience. You know, whether it's DreamWorks or Pixar, those are always the one that actually feel like they added depth and they're not gimmicky. Because I think because everything's artificial anyway, maybe.
And this is more like stuff coming at the screen, which I'm like, look, it's in my living room. It's like, not really.
Well, there was that period of time where every movie tried to have a 3D release. I mean, good Lord. 3D. I think 300 is probably the most egregious for me, with like the spear coming straight at the camera, just being like,
oh
guys,
man, I don't know.
You didn't need to do this.
Yeah. I feel like it's the movies after 300 that are even worse. Your Beowulfs.
Beowulf.
Lest we forget.
And that is an animated movie.
Yeah. Well, I guess. Yeah. I think I think you and I saw Beowulf together, Gert.
Yeah, and I'm pretty sure we started treating it like a Mystery Science Theater 3000 show pretty quick.
I don't remember a lot of complaints from audience members around us to shut up. I think on that one we might have been improving the movie.
Here's a bad sign. I completely forgot that Beowulf the movie existed. And I'm somebody that has I don't have a poster on my wall that's The Creature from the Black Lagoon. It's the sequel to The Creature from the Black Lagoon, and it's also in Italian. So, like,
oh no!
If I can't remember your movie, Beowulf, and I've got La Vendetta del Monstro on the wall.
Yeah, Revenge of the Creature. Interesting. You know what, though? Still better than Creature Walks Among Us.
Well,
low
got one
bar,
of my favorite
John.
Characters in there. In Revenge of the Creature, there's a dog, and his name is Chris. And everyone just yells for the dog, but
that's right.
They don't specify it's a dog. So at a certain point, John Agar is just wandering around outside going, Chris, here, Chris. And it's like,
yes,
that's weird. Just Chris the dog or something. You're like, here, boy, we'll be fine. But like,
you had to watch Chris. You were just drawn to the movie.
Name.
Yeah, it's a weird name for a dog, especially a movie dog. Like,
Wiggles or something, Patches, Spot, Rover,
anything like that. Which now that you bring that up, that's a good plug for one of our new podcasts on our podcast network that I do co-host called Campbell and Jones Meet the Monsters, where for the first season of which Brendan Jones and myself will be watching all of the Universal Monster movies.
Hey, there you go.
Yeah,
it's a ride through things such as Creature from the Black Lagoon and The Creature Walks Among Us.
Yeah, we cover both.
That's the range of quality. I'm pretty sure that's the spectrum.
Was Creature? Yeah, I think Creature Walks Among Us might have been the worst of the whole bunch. But
for those who don't know, The Creature Walks Among Us features a creature that from the Black Lagoon who wears a jumpsuit the whole time and just has a really burned face, so he kind of looks like a person.
It's weird that he has clothes.
an accident burns off his scales, and then they try to domesticate him and kind of make him a person. Yeah, and they put him in a suit. Oh, it's weird. It's a weird movie. That is far in the future, because that is actually the very end of the Universal Monsters. That's the last one of the official Universal Monster canon, because where do you go after that?
It's like trying to get Dracula to be a substitute English teacher. Like, I don't think English is even his primary language. Why are you having him teach that?
I don't know, though.
Biology or history or something, but like
that actually sounds like a pretty good movie, though.
I'm surprised that wasn't one of the 60s and 70s Christopher Lee Dracula movies.
Again, it's also in that era of we're making this movie so that teenagers, when they go to a drive-in, have something to jump scare at and then make out. That's why those movies are like 90% talking, 10%.
Yeah,
it's like we know what you're here for.
Yep. Indeed. Speaking of monsters, this week's starter guide, which if you don't know, a feature we do on the website is we have our writers. We'll pick one of our writers who has a big fandom for some movie or TV franchise. This week's starter guide is about the, believe it or not, 15 season long run of the television series Supernatural. I knew that, but once again, when I actually read this piece, I was reminded of it again and went, my God, 15 seasons they did of those guys driving around fighting monsters. Were either of you
among other things?
Were either of you Supernatural viewers of because I watched it for the first couple seasons and I didn't like walk away in anger, but it got away from me like so many shows do. And there's so much of it now. I don't have the time to go back.
I didn't get into it because I wasn't introduced to it until well into its run, and it felt a lot like a project.
Yeah.
And I was like, I need a place to tell me where to start, which is literally the purpose of the starter guide stuff.
Exactly, so the purpose of the starter guide.
Where would I even begin? So
yeah, because that's sort of where it is. I'm going like, on paper, this does sound like something I would like, but at a certain point, when you're 8, 9, 10 seasons in, I'm like, oh, and we're network. This is a network show, so you're talking 22, 24 episodes a season. That's a lot of show, but it does have a rabid fan base.
Well, and a continuity that people follow litigiously, and that alone can make it feel unapproachable, because on paper it is a Monster of the Week show, right? Until it's very much not.
Yeah.
I watched Supernatural for John, I'd say probably about the same as you, like the first few seasons. I think I started trailing off somewhere in the season 4, season 5 range, because around that time we had a bunch of these sorts of shows. We had Supernatural, we had Grimm, we had Once Upon a Time was starting. We had a lot of Supernatural, Monster of the Week sorts of shows happening at around the same time. And
it's true. There was something in the air, or probably because of the popularity of this. I definitely think Supernatural, from what I gather, went down an X-Files path where it was Monster of the Week, but the longer it went, the more it built its mythology, and the more it really became preaching to the choir of, you better be in on this, because we're really, remember that guy from 6 seasons ago? He's back, for whatever. So it inspires that kind of fandom. But it also does make it which I do think is why when Kinsey suggested doing this as a starter guide, I said, absolutely, that's a show that definitely needs a starter guide.
Yeah.
It was one of those shows that I always appreciated from a distance, and especially at Comic-Cons and stuff.
Because you can't go to a Comic-Con without running into a huge Supernatural presence.
Absolutely. So it was one of those shows that I'm always going to respect it from a distance, like a lion. I know it's vast and powerful.
Yeah.
And I'll never understand it. And maybe one day, maybe.
Well, and I think all of us understand that fandom passion for something that's not supernatural. But I mean, Gergani, you can talk. She's talking about Star Wars, and you can go pretty.
Are we talking about Star Wars now? Is that a thing we're doing now?
I said Star Wars.
Oh, he said Star Wars. That means I get to talk about it, right? I'm pretty sure. That's the contract I signed.
Yeah. No Star Wars content this week.
Let me tell you the story of Darth Plagueis the Wise, if I can.
I have thought about asking you to do some kind of starter guide on like the Star Wars novels. Was what I was thinking for you, Mike. Might be a thing because
I do feel A New Hope. I don't know. That's where you
start. No. The movies are a little obvious, and also they're pretty ubiquitous as well. People are generally familiar with at least like the original trilogy and stuff like that. Sure. But there are so many novels, and as I know, and definitely you know, there are tiers of that now in terms of what's canon and things like that at this point.
Not anymore. There used to be.
Yeah. So there's just canon and then the non-canon books.
Right. Ever since the Disney acquisition,
they basically kicked out all that stuff, right?
Yeah, it kicked out all the stuff that they call Star Wars Legends now. And most of the books you see from that era will have like a gold stripe across the top that says Legends. But a lot of that stuff is still in print, which is wild.
That's what I was going to say. I think it's kind of cool that they still keep that stuff out there, even if they are putting it to the side in some way. Yeah, there's still money. There's still money. I mean, the fact that Marvel Comics, which now has the Star Wars license because of the Disney deal, is reprinting the comics from the 70s and early 80s in omnibuses and epic collections. Like, nobody needs that stuff.
There was a fun twist on that though recently because Star Wars Visions just came out on Disney Plus. There was the Star Wars show anthology series developed by a bunch of different anime studios, did little shorts, and one of them features a rabbit girl as the main character. And there were some people online being like, oh, the furries, yada, yada, yada. I don't like my animal people in my Star Wars. I'm like, well, actually, Star Wars has a long, proud tradition of bunny folk going back to the original Marvel Star Wars comics run. So I will not hear any of this naysaying.
Not saying it's good necessarily, but it does exist.
Well, that's the case for a lot of Star Wars stuff, right? I'm not saying it's good, but it does exist. Because
actually, that bunny character has come back around a couple of times in recent years. There was a short story featuring him in the From Another Point of View book for The Empire Strikes Back, which I love those books. But yeah, I mean, starter guide for Star Wars books, that would be an endeavor. I'll need time, John.
Take your time. That's something for the potential future. But I was thinking like that similarly, I think feels unapproachable to the ones who are not already initiated on that stuff. I want to talk about a piece that Kristen, who's been on the last 2 episodes of this show, wrote about Ocarina of Time, Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time. And it's a very personal story. She wrote about the connection she has to it, to her late mother. It's a really nice piece. But I want to talk about that game in general and specifically talk with you guys about that because I was not a Nintendo kid. So I have never I'm loose. I was a Sega kid.
I know.
And then subsequently never picked up any of the Nintendo. Yeah, I know.
I thought I called you a friend, John. Jeez.
I know everyone I knew was a Nintendo kid. We had Sega. Thanks, Kristen, in the chat too for that. And
she's leaving. Yeah,
that's enough for Kristen there. What is your guys' connection to this game? Because I do know certainly, and I'm loosely familiar with it from being around people playing it and things like that. But I know this is a game that means a lot to a lot of people, not just to Kristen.
Chris, I don't know if you want to take the lead. I mean, I got stuff to say about this game.
I got stuff to say too.
Go for it. I was just rambling about Star Wars, so you go.
So much like Kirsten, my mom, I don't want to say my mom got me into Legend of Zelda, but she started playing it when I started playing it, and I was like 6, and she was in her 30s, probably my age by about the time she was playing it. She was great at it. The original Legend of Zelda, she beat the first and the second quest way before I beat the first. I don't think I beat the second quest until I was in my 20s when I went to play the game. We had Zelda 2. We had Link to the Past, which is probably my favorite Zelda game. I don't think she never played Ocarina of Time, but I definitely remember that was one of the last games I had before I went to college. And I remember playing it we had this converted garage and we got it for Christmas. And so I just remember it being like freezing in this converted garage while playing Ocarina of Time. And that's sort of a personal connection. Yeah, that was probably one of the first games that my younger brother also picked up. So it was nice to see like she has passed this on to me, and we would play Legend of Zelda together. And now I'm kind of like passing the torch on to him. He's 9 years younger than I am. So it's like it felt the same kind of connection of that, hey, we both have our own save files. We're both kind of like working through this together. She saw that we were having a little difficulty, so she also went out and bought us the guide for how to play it. She's like, here you go. So I'm like, oh, that's cute.
Game.
Yeah, like a legacy game. I think I like Link to the Past more, mostly because there's a lot of stuff in Ocarina that doesn't translate necessarily as well. Like the camera can be difficult to figure out, like, what am I looking at? And every time you go through a door and it closes, Link has to turn around and look at the door and then be like, hey, that door closed. It's like, that happens constantly. Like, you do not need to keep showing me that. Like, I got it. So there's a lot of instances where it's like, do you remember how to do this? It's like, we've only done it 800,000 times. Yes, I remember how to do it. Like,
shockingly enough, that's not the Zelda game with the most annoying tutorial reminders.
No, but it's definitely one of the ones I remember as like, hey, you found a thing that you found a whole bunch of already. It's like, I know. Like, it's why I picked it up. Like,
I know it's 5 rupees. Thank you.
You found 5 rubies. I know what. Yes, got it.
So
or that
you mentioned strategy guides. I don't have the Ocarina one in front of me, but I do have this, the Toys R Us Prima Majora's Mask original
with the Toys R Us logo on
with my tape holding together the spine.
Nice. Nice. There was one thing I always remember was the owl, where you bump into this owl and he asks you a bunch of stuff, or he tells you a bunch of stuff. He's like, oh, you're going to do a thing with an owl, and I'm an owl, and here's where you go. And I'm like, okay, cool. And then it goes, would you like to hear that again? And it's the only character in the game that swaps the yes and the no. So, and it's not a game where you push like, oh, you have an A button for yes and a B button for no. So you have to highlight specifically, no, I don't want to hear that again, because it automatically goes through yes and then does the whole thing again. And I always remember being like, did I not hit no? Like, what are you doing this again?
Mike, I don't know if you see here in the chat, but Lady Kristen says she would like to buy that from you.
Out of my cold, dead hands. I literally, the reason I had that on hand,
that's in your will, right?
Was I just used it last year, so it's on the top of my stack of old strategy guides, because I was replaying Majora's Mask and Ocarina of Time, for that matter. They had some amazing re-releases for the 3DS that I quite enjoyed.
Very cool. This is getting threatening now from Lady Kristen in the chat. So if Mike ever goes missing, I know who suspect number 1 is.
Just saying.
Kristen, I don't know you having that game guide to Zelda before.
Why does it say "To Mike Love Mom" on the inside cover? I don't understand.
Lady Kirsten, please don't rub out Mike, because then I'm going to have to end up reading all this Star Wars expanded universe stuff and write an article about.
Somebody has to, Chris. Somebody has to.
You start with the Thrawn trilogy, okay? I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, even I've read the Thrawn trilogy, so that's base level stuff. Let's switch over to we had an article.
I too like Ocarina of Time, though.
Yeah.
Yes.
Mike, what's your Ocarina of Time experience?
Oh,
yeah, actually, go ahead.
So my dad will usually say pretty quickly that the greatest mistake he ever made as a parent was buying me my first video game console. He's not wrong.
No, I've known you long enough to attest that it's definitely I can't imagine you without it, and I don't know who knows where you would be had you not had the game system.
My point with saying that is he bought me the PlayStation. The first PlayStation was my first video game console that I had as a child.
Nice.
Every subsequent video game console after that I bought with my own money, and that includes the N64. Which I bought a used N64 by like scrapping and saving money, doing odd jobs, mowing lawns, all that good childhood nostalgia stuff.
Yeah. Kid labor.
The first game I bought with my own money was Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time. It is such a formative game because it's the first of the Zelda games to feel... I mean, it was the first one in 3D, which is a big turning point for video games in general and for the Zelda franchise specifically. And it just felt like, oh my God, I'm having this adventure in this big, vast open world. Obviously, in retrospect, going back to it and comparing it to games today like Skyrim or something, and it's like, oh, it's so cute. We always thought Hyrule Field was so big, and then we look at Skyrim.
Yeah.
But at the time, it did feel like this changed the game. Pardon the pun. And playing through it for the first time was... I mean, it felt like, holy crap, we're in the future now. I'm playing this immersive 3D experience, and I am the hero with the sword in a dungeon fighting monsters. This is everything Gary Gygax told me I could be. And we're achieving it on my television screen.
Prophecy is true.
Was foretold.
Which is weird saying that now, because I've lapsed so hard back into Dungeons and Dragons that I barely play any video games these days. But yeah, in those sweet halcyon 90s days, this was like, this is the future. Reboot told me this was how it was gonna be.
Reboot.
Yes, there we go. I should have had a clock to how soon will Mike reference reboot.
It was gonna be Reboot or Tron. It was gonna be one of those two.
Yes. So I want to shift over to a story that we had this week from Brian, who's one of our writers. And it's specifically, he wrote a piece about using comic books in counseling. So using comic books as a therapy device, which is pretty interesting and not something I have thought much about. But it's he talked to a few different counselors about this. And I think it's pretty interesting. He seems to specifically be talking about superhero stories, but I imagine any comics could be part of this, of course.
Mm-hmm.
Both using comic book stories and creating comic books as well as art therapy.
I have a friend who does art therapy as well. She also does equestrian therapy, where she'll do not therapy to horses, but uses horses to help kids do therapy. Yeah. And as somebody who's also a teacher, and we look at how students kind of react to things or process information, particularly trauma or other events, having them write it out in a creative way gives them that sort of control over something they don't normally have control over. So superheroes fight evil or do fantastical things that we can't do. So they provide that sort of outlet for a creative person, but also for an outlet for someone to live in a world that's not necessarily the world they live in now, and maybe apply new lessons to it or take things away from it. And I think that is helpful to just how human beings function. And it's something that we've been doing since we've been sitting around campfires, telling stories and drawn on the walls of caves with old pieces of bones. So I think that, yeah, exactly what Zamboni Last is saying in the chat is that superheroes are always relatable to somebody, and that if you can pull something out of that, great. And thankfully, there are so many superheroes to choose from. You can find a superhero that's right for you. And if you can't, you can make your own.
Yeah. I mean, there's no question that even outside of a therapy context, as a kid growing up, superheroes really gave me my moral code. I didn't grow up I grew up devoid of any form of religion or anything like that. So I've always said that the superhero comics I read were sort of that backbone that I think a lot of people gain from the hugely problematic subject that is organized religion, pros and cons. I'm not here to argue that. But in the absence of anything like that, I looked to Superman and Batman and Spider-Man as the figures that I sought to be like and borrow their worldviews and morality.
And on the 3rd month after the crossover event, Superman did rise, and lo, did the cyborg Superman be brought low.
When I was a
Cyborg
kid,
Superman.
the first comic book storyline I followed issue to issue was the death and subsequent return of Superman. So, yes, for me as a kid, he did die and then rose again. And also, yes, defeated the cyborg Superman while doing that, which was pretty good. And then he had a mullet. Also, he came back from the dead with a mullet.
Well, we can't be perfect.
Oh, what was
He
it?
had a
And
sweet black
Kid
costume.
Metropolis was in there.
Mhm.
And
well, there were
Superman,
the
Kid
reign of the
Metropolis,
Superman,
the
the
Annihilator?
Eradicator,
Eradicator,
Yeah,
and
the
Steel.
Steel, yeah,
Right. Okay.
and Steel stuck around, as did eventually Superboy, who was the clone. Heavenwheel died and come back with a mullet. I have at least a few times.
I was given a mullet against my will once.
Just handed it to you on the street.
Yeah. My dad, his family lived up in like the hillbilly hills of Western Maryland. And Mom was like, "You got to give the kid a haircut. Like, take the kid to get a haircut." So we were up there visiting relatives, and he took me to like a hillbilly barber place, and they gave me a mullet. And I came home and it was like, oh no, what happened? Like, and so I de-mulleted myself with just a pair of scissors in the mirror.
Business in front, party in back.
The comic books of the 90s were so rife with mullets. Like I was
pouches, energy powers,
not nonstop pouches. But like I was after the most recent Venom movie came out, I went back and started reading some of the original Venom books, and oh boy, the mullet on Eddie Brock in that book is severe. But even like Mary Jane in the Spider-Man comics kind of has a mullet. Like Sue Storm sort of had a mullet. It's not just the men; the women had mullets too. And
you go back and watch Seinfeld. Seinfeld has kind of a mullet.
Oh, Seinfeld very much has a mullet.
Yeah.
And firmly a mullet on both John Stamos and Dave Coulier in early Full House.
Yes.
Very serious mullet vibes.
Yes.
So
Zamboni Lass is asking, Pixar didn't happen. This was back before we had digital cameras. So I'm not wasting money and on a one shot of that. So.
And I really hope
back
Zamboni,
into fashion.
So, yeah,
don't bring that evil here.
Yeah, no, we're good.
Turning to Swamp Thing there. Do not bring your evil here. I love that a story about that's what I love about the show. A story about comics and counseling turns into a whole runner about mullets. That's what we're here to do, folks.
That trauma.
The beauty of comics as well, though, is that they can kind of be everything and anything. Yes. Comics isn't a genre; it's a medium.
Yeah, they are glorious. They are dumb. They are impactful. They are funny. They're whatever you need them to be.
Maybe that's how everyone was getting their trauma out about their mullets, was drawing mullets into all these comic books. Like, this happened to me.
This happened to me. It's gonna happen to Superman too.
I mean, an interesting follow-up to this article at some point, and I'm not volunteering myself, John. Well,
I'd never get any writers on here if anything they suggested they had to write, no one would come on this show.
That's how I ended up.
But there's a whole subgenre of autobiographical comics that you and I have taken college courses on.
We did.
A lot of these writers working through stuff and putting it on the page in form of comics. I mean, I would be remiss if I didn't mention Craig Thompson's Blankets.
And Persepolis, I would say, is another big one too.
And Fun Home, I think, is another big one. Mouse is maybe the biggest one.
There's a whole bunch, and that's another thing that certainly you and I have been trumpeting for a long time, which is comics are vastly more than superhero stories, and even beyond genre stories, other than sci-fi, horror, and stuff like that. There are just straight up, as we said, autobiographies, just dramas, romances. I mean, whatever you want, there's a comic for it. So, let's switch to a subject that's slightly more fun, and another piece that Kristen wrote for us, which is the top 5 movie witches, specifically kid-friendly movie witches.
This was very specific, yes.
Kid. Well, and I was thinking about this. There are a lot of witch movies. Lady Kristen is right. Witches, though, tend to be villains of kids' movies. I mean, there are certainly legitimately scary witches in more adult horror movies, but I do think of the witch as not only in kids' movies, but often targeting children for their evil deeds.
Yeah,
I mean,
eating them. There's a lot of witch eating.
We could get into a larger conversation about the vilification of women and how the patriarchy sucks, because that's probably the reason.
We could. I don't know that this is. I don't know that this is the show or that this is the makeup of the panel who should be discussing that.
As a historian, when the printing press gets created in 1453 and starts getting underway, there are the two most popular books in Europe. The first one is the Bible, and the second one is the Malleus Maleficarum, which is called The Witch's Hammer, which is a guide on how to hunt and kill witches. It's the second most popular book right under the Bible. So,
and that book later adapted into Vin Diesel's The Last Witch Hunter. Yes, no.
But yeah, Lady Kirsten's article. The Wicked Witch of the West jumped out at me.
Sure.
Much like the way my mom one time dressed up as the Wicked Witch of the West and jumped out at one of our neighbor kids during Halloween and freaked that kid out so bad she never dressed up in a Halloween costume ever again. And she had that laugh down. And I can still hear the Wicked Witch doing it. And then at one time my mom came in and did it behind me, and I was like, no more of that.
Yeah. And I bet that kid she's scared is still doing it too. Is still hearing it too.
Yeah. She was like, I'm never doing this again. This is a terrible idea. It's like I've traumatized a child.
I would agree with many of the picks on this top 5 list. And even so far as to say there's some good stuff in the honorable mentions, but I take umbrage with the fact that there's a glaring piece missing from this article.
What is it?
My mom is a fun lady.
That is Debbie Reynolds as Aggie Cromwell from the Disney Channel original series movie Halloween Town, 1998. She's their grandmother. She's a witch. She lives in Halloween Town, and they have to go to a fun, magical land. And she's not a bad guy. And Kristen, you gotta see Halloween Town. It's 90s camp at its best.
Samantha from Bewitched is a witch. She's not a jerk.
She did say movie witches.
This is true. That's the dodge.
That's true. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Movie witches. Yeah. I guess TV. There's a lot of good witches. You also have Willow from Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
Yeah. And Sabrina, a teenage
Sabrina, classic. Yeah. A couple of
like Madam Mim.
Shows. Yeah. Like Madam Mim. She's very good choice.
She's just my right flavor of that person's a real jerk, but isn't actively trying to like whatever the Wicked Witch is doing in that castle with all her her army and her winged monkey fleet, whatever she's doing. I'm fine. She's not around. When she melts, good.
I mean, what's an interesting thing? What is the Wicked Witch of the West goals? Obviously it's vengeance for the death of the sister at a certain point, but prior to that, I think it's interesting. What was she up to?
She's just a terrorist. I think
she needs revenge against James Franco. I saw the prequel. I know what's
yeah, of course. Who could forget Sam Raimi's Oz the Great and Powerful?
Who could forget until you just brought it up, and which was everything.
Mila Kunis needs to destroy.
Yes, Zamboni Last does bring up Wicked, of course. Both the novel and the musical did add an origin story that certainly casts her in a different light. But I mean, that is iconic. That is sort of Wicked Witch of the West is pretty much what I think of when somebody says witch. That's the image that comes to mind. The most iconic. Now, number 1 on this list was the Sanderson sisters from Hocus Pocus, which I know is a massive childhood favorite of so many people. I saw it as a kid. It didn't land with me. I don't want to. look,
I'm shaking my head at the both of you. I am on page with the Sanderson sisters
with Hocus Pocus.
Okay.
Like I said, I don't besmirch anyone who's a fan of it. I'm not here to gender things, but in the 90s we certainly did, and that was a movie that I think little kid me was like, oh, that's more for girls. I'm not saying that's right or wrong, anybody. I'm just saying that was the perception, particularly when we were kids. I think it was like there were girl movies and boy movies and girl toys and boy toys. Something we're actively as a culture trying to move away from, which I think is great. But I think that was why I had a distance from it. Once again, and on that same point, my sister loved it.
I had a sort of a middle of the road one. It came out probably when I was in like later middle school, 7th grade, 8th grade, probably somewhere around in there. And I remember there was this kid I went to an all boys school, and this kid sat next to me, and he was like, "Man, saw this movie, The Witches, and it's pretty good." And I'm like, "Oh, okay." Or not The Witches, I'm sorry.
Different movie. Hocus Pocus.
And I was like, okay. And then I caught it on like HBO, and I was like, it's not for me.
See, that was the movie that introduced me to the kind of idea of urban fantasy, because you have these witches introduced into modern day. Obviously, Sarah Jessica Parker. You had a big crossover there with a certain fan base. There's also this movie introduced me to the superlative Doug Jones as their zombie minion.
Doug Jones is a treasure.
Absolutely. I think this movie was a lot of fun, and it's right in there with those Disney classics of the 90s range. And this one was before they all started kind of pushing onto the Disney Channel, specifically in the later 90s.
It does feel like something that a few years later, would have been a Disney Channel original movie. You guys know they are currently working on a Hocus Pocus sequel. They've just announced that I think they're shooting it now.
Two Hocus, Two Pocus.
Because obviously there is so much nostalgia for it. And it is, I still see people dress up as those characters. It's still a popular costume. I feel like it's only grown as a cult classic, especially for 90s kids. And oh boy, 90s nostalgia is big business right now. So I think it's going to be a Disney Plus movie. I don't know though exactly, but I think that's which is kind of in it's almost like there's the Disney Channel movies, there's the Disney theatrical movies, and the Disney Plus movies are the middle ground. It's the mid-budget.
I feel is a good place to test the waters on what is more of like a cult classic from the 90s. Like Hackers is a cult classic from the 90s. Another movie that someone said, I really like Hackers. And because of my Hocus Pocus experience, I was like, Hackers is not going to be very good. And then I watched it and I went, Hackers was not very good.
It's not.
But if you saw it like formative age,
so
and
I feel
it
that
influenced a whole generation of leather-clad, I don't know what I'm doing with my lives, to really be inspired about what they thought hacking was.
That is the thing. That movie in no way relates to anything about hacking. Much like any of the cyber thrillers of the 90s, that and the net,
just like Hocus Pocus doesn't relate to real witchcraft, John.
No one's got the Malleus Maleficarum, and they're not dunking someone in a chair in a way. So, there you go.
Well, then there was the more grown up version of Hocus Pocus, I feel like, which was The Craft. That was the R-rated group of witches movie. And there was just a sequel to that was out last year, I think.
Really?
I think it was called The Craft Legacy, or one of those one-word subtitles. I don't think it made much of an impression on you.
Just call it The Craft 2. Getting crafty.
Craft 2, crafting.
Craft Legacy. This is a thing.
Yeah.
Eliza Bulk needs work.
David Duchovny was in it.
Ooh, well, if Duchovny's in it, that actually does sweeten the deal for me.
David Duchovny's in it?
Yeah.
As Fox Mulder?
I don't think so.
Now we're talking. Let's get Mulder and Scully rolling up on a group of teenage witches. Now we have a picture.
Or are you going to do a super weird crossover and go like, I have the Craft 2, but also the Red Shoe Diaries?
It's the Craft 2 and Evolution, actually.
No, it's his
Ooh.
character from Evolution.
They're gonna use witchcraft to fight biology.
Zamboni last. I did see something about the movie with the lady raising the lamb as her child. I think it's just called Lamb.
Just called Lamb.
Yeah, it's called Lamb.
It looks really weird. Is that Noomi Rapace?
Yeah.
I think is the lead in that. That looks very strange.
Yeah.
Which by the way, when I say that, is never a negative to me. I seek out strange movies. So that's like must see if something is weird.
You can go listen to our review of Prisoners of the Ghostlands over on Panel Up between John and I. He was certainly into that weird.
Yeah. Oh, I did dig Prisoners of the Ghostland. That movie is nuts.
Watched and would kind of recommend Troll Hunter.
Oh yeah,
Troll Hunter, very good. Yeah.
Troll Hunter is awesome. Yeah.
Let's talk Lamb weird, but still.
Let's talk about a journey I sent you on, Chris, which was a journey through the Halloween franchise. in response to the upcoming it just came out yesterday in theaters and streaming on Peacock, a service everyone has. But the new Halloween movie, Halloween Kills, which is tearing up the box office right now, and I think it's expected to be number one, playing off of the 2018 Halloween movie.
Is there anything out right now that's competing with it?
James Bond and the third week of Venom, I guess.
Shang-Chi is still hanging in some places, yeah.
But no, and also like this is the time for a Halloween movie.
Yes.
So
unlike some of the ones they released in July, and we're like, go see this. It's super hot outside and everyone's at the beach. Halloween.
I do distinctly remember Halloween H2O coming out in the middle of the summer and like, what is this? Also, not great. But not the worst of that.
Oh my god! I would put it if I watched.
It's in the upper tier. Yeah,
I watched all of them. It might be fourth best.
I think I think I would agree with that. Yeah, it's
out of 12.
It's watchable. It's totally watchable.
It's not an embarrassing giant disaster that makes me want to go. Please brain, don't remember any of this. Like part 5.
Oh yeah, part 5 or Halloween Resurrection.
My brain actively forgot part 5.
Yeah,
Halloween Resurrection. At least my brain was like, "Hey, this is dumb," and I'm like, "Yeah, this is not going anywhere though because it's
dumb. Halloween is one of the crazier franchises, especially within its own continuity.
So let's get into this.
Let's do it.
It's Halloween time. Halloween is a movie that made 200 times what its budget was. Yeah. So it's one of those movies that people looked at and went, "Holy cats, more money, please." Mm-hmm. And the original Halloween, 1978, was a shoestring budget, and it is John Carpenter doing some horror, which he hadn't normally. At that point, he hadn't done a lot of horror by that point.
He hadn't done any. He'd done Dark Star and he'd done Assault on Precinct 13.
He's a new guy. He hadn't really done any of that. And so it doesn't immediately read like a horror movie. And it is very, the pacing is very deliberate and kind of slow. Mm-hmm. And it doesn't, of the movies, it's probably the better-ish best one, but it's also ruined if you've ever seen a movie. If you've ever seen a horror movie, you're like, okay, no, we're good, got it. So
everything stole from Halloween, yeah.
Like I wrote about it in my article as you get that 5-gallon tub of vanilla ice cream, and if you've never had ice cream, oh my god, yes.
Yeah.
But if you're like an 8th century peasant, this is amazing. But if you've had like a Snickers, okay, I'm good. I've had a Snickers.
I remember my dad talking about going to see it in 1978, and he's like, it was the scariest thing I'd ever seen in my life. He was like shaken to his core by that movie. And then by the time I saw it, the filmmaking is good. It is still infinitely better made than most of the stuff that ripped it off. No question. Yes. Even just going to the original Friday the 13th, whoa, there's a huge step down.
But like going back and watching it, there's a lot of stuff that the movie did really well, especially the first one, that the later ones made annoying, which is adding like done like unnecessary music stings.
Yep.
Behind me back there is a little beholder that's just been sitting there the whole time. It's a little knitted one. I had a friend who knitted me a little beholder. And it's just sitting there. And in a lot of Halloween 1, there's just instances where Michael Myers is just standing outside of somebody's house, and the movie doesn't make a big deal out of it. He's just standing there. There's no music sting. There's no like, it doesn't like rack focus to him or anything. It just pans across someone in a kitchen. Michael Myers standing outside. He's not moving. He's not going like, hey, come out here. Like, there's none of that. It's just very subtle. And so it's a good movie to kind of like go rewatch, and your brain sort of notices Michael's presence. And at the end of the movie, spoiler alert,
he's just called
it's 42
the
years
presence,
old,
right?
It's called the shape.
Like he gets shot and he falls out of a window, and his therapist shoots him like any good therapist would do. And he falls out of a window.
Donald Pleasance in these movies.
It's great.
Incredible.
Laying on the ground, Donald Pleasance looks out the window, sees he's there, and then like looks up for a second, and then sees he's not there. And then just starts looking around the house at like dark corners of things, which by the way was put together in the editing process at the end of the movie. Like, we want to add a little something. And since your brain has been seeing Michael Myers in the background the whole time, you're like subconsciously kind of like looking for where Michael Myers is. And I'm like, great. You did so much by not showing all this extra. And the movie is not super gory. I know we had that little conversation about an hour ago.
No, it's not.
Like gore sometimes. You can pull a face off, but like
same here.
It's subtle, and it leaves a lot of it up to your imagination.
The violence is still visceral. It's just not gory.
It's more realistic. Like that's a knife going into a human. Like
someone is still getting impaled and stuck to a door. But other than that,
particularly the scenes of him strangling people are so hard to watch.
Yeah,
because that's not a gory death, but you're watching someone get the life strangled out.
Yeah, it's not overblown, and it feels more. It feels more visceral. But in a not like grotesque way. I mentioned this a couple weeks ago when I was talking about the top movie slashers, and that I liked how Michael Myers' murdering is more coming from a place of like mental illness around like. You're dealing with someone in your family that has mental illness and they're expressing it, and you're like, I don't know what to do here. And that part is terrifying because it's like, well, that's kind of a part of you too. Which is one of the reasons why I like Halloween as opposed to Halloween or Halloween. Does that sound confusing? Well, thanks a lot, Halloween makers. You have 3 movies that are all named Halloween.
You do.
Thanks, Rob Zombie. You started this trend.
You have a Halloween, 1978. You have Rob Zombie's Halloween, also called Halloween, and then you have Halloween 2018.
Yeah.
Halloween 2018, Laurie Strode which ignores all the movies from Halloween 1.
Yeah, it's the clean slate.
Halloween.
It just accepts Halloween as the original one happened, and then this is the next story now 40 years later.
So the canon is you have Halloween, which skips Halloween and goes right to Halloween.
Yeah,
so that's true. Yeah. It's Halloween and then Halloween.
And then the previous Halloween that was the Rob Zombie Halloween ignored all of it, was just a fresh start meant to kick off its own franchise.
Look, I'm a Godzilla fan. I'm used to this kind of nonsense all over the place. Well, we've got Godzilla, there's Godzilla, and then there's Godzilla. I'm tracking what
I'm going to grab something behind me because I want you to talk about something, an entry in this franchise that I particularly find fascinating, Chris.
Okay. He's going to come back.
Oh, he's got Season of the Witch.
But I like that. Yeah,
I want to talk about this because this is my Shout Factory Collector's Edition Blu-ray of Halloween 3 Season of the Witch, which is such a bizarre movie.
I'm going to get to that one. But I think that a good place to start, if you've never seen a horror movie, Halloween 1978, yes.
Yeah.
If you have seen a horror movie, I think my recommendation is Halloween 2018. Though, again, it's not a... This is a tough series because it's not that great, but what I like about the 2018 one is that it does feel that family illness of like Michael Myers is my brother and like he's gonna kill me and everything, and it's like, and now I'm being like a weird survivalist person, and I did that for 40 years, and everyone around Jamie Lee Curtis's character is like, really, like kind of get over it. Like, you're 60 now.
No, I love the 2018 movie because it's about trauma, right? It's about how trauma has made this, and this woman's life, while she survived that night, her life effectively ended that night.
Yeah.
And all she's done is prepare herself to potentially fight Michael Myers again.
Yeah.
Which, spoiler alert for the movie, is what happens.
Yeah.
That's what sold me on the movie when I was like, oh, Laurie Strode armed to the teeth and ready to throw down with Michael Myers. You got my money, movie.
And it also just sort of like erodes her psyche and pushes her family members away and things like that. And I'm like,
I mean,
that's
she
exactly what would happen.
I think
this was a real situation.
I think she had lost custody of her daughter at a certain point in the past. Who now, I mean, Judy Greer, always great, and as her daughter, who's like actively wearing Christmas sweaters on Halloween to be like, I don't even recognize that day, all right? Because my mom ruined my life and this whole thing, and she's like, I just want to be a normal suburban person.
Yes.
And you see that then when you see Jamie Lee Curtis, that great scene where she comes into that dinner table and she just starts breaking down and chugging wine, and it's like, oh, because that's the most moment where it's like, oh boy, grandma is losing it, and we're in a public place. I've been there with an Alzheimer's afflicted grandfather when you're like, oh God, we're in the pancake place and he's having a meltdown. That's realistically uncomfortable, and not something. You don't see stuff that subtle and realistic in most slasher movies.
Which is what I like about that movie, because it parallels so nicely with the 1978 one, where a lot of that is also subtle and more realistic and has a cleaner like feel to it. Right. So that parallel I really enjoy.
No, that really does feel like a movie, and then that's the first one that really actually feels like a sequel to the first movie in tone and execution. It's considerably gorier on that front. Considerably gorier, because I don't think you could make something that subtle in its gore today. I just think audiences would reject it. It would feel like they're holding back. So you have Michael Myers stomping people's heads, you know.
I would say that thankfully I was not asked to rank them, because like,
oh no. It was a journey through, was kind of what I wanted you to do.
You have two at the top, and then like it's like who's tied for last?
No, all the sequels are pretty rough for the most part.
You're holding up one.
Halloween 3, Season of the Witch.
So Season of the Witch,
kind of love this movie.
One that doesn't have anything to do with anything.
Well, because so in Halloween 2. Not to be confused with Halloween 2.
Yeah, the Rob Zombie's Halloween.
The other one. The one that took place in 1981.
Thankfully, we've broken that trend now with Halloween Kills being the sequel to Halloween 28. They didn't
Halloween 2, because that would be a third Halloween 2. Especially when 2018 Halloween should just be Halloween 2. And anyway.
Yeah, it is.
Anyway, so the Season of the Witch is silly and weird and kind of bizarre, and half the time I'm like, what is happening? But
it feels like a Twilight Zone, like a really weird Twilight Zone episode.
That was the goal. They had killed Michael Myers off with explosions in part 2.
I do have a certain affinity for Halloween 2, simply for how nuts it gets, and particularly, once again, Pleasance really sells that movie, because he takes what he did in the first movie and brings it up to an 11.
Be a terrible.
You thought a therapist killing his patient was not far enough. Wait until you see Donald Pleasance screaming, "He is evil incarnate!"
The death of Ben Tramer in that movie. Do yourself a favor, everybody, and just go on YouTube and watch the death of Ben Tramer, because it is one of the craziest scenes I've seen in any movie.
So with Michael Myers dead,
both like, Michael Myers and Loomis blow up.
Loomis is dead. Michael Myers is dead. Jamie Lee Curtis had a film career by that point, so she's like, I don't feel like I'm doing any more of this.
I'm going to go do Trading
those
Places.
are your three mains. So for Halloween 3 was supposed to be an anthology, like Tales from the Crypt or like The Twilight Zone or Black Mirror nowadays. So they were like, let's do something that is about Halloween and has nothing to do with the series, and we'll just make anthology movies that come out during Halloween, because people want to see something scary.
That idea.
Something scary.
Like every year we'll make a movie, a new horror movie, set on or around Halloween. That's actually that sounds cool.
And the subtitle will be, what is the thing going to be about? And Halloween 3, the Season of the Witch, is about appeasing occultic witches using pieces of Stonehenge to... Okay, so there's... Oh my God. So there's a company that goes...
You can see these are the... Yeah. There's a company called the Silver Shamrock Company, and they're making these Halloween masks that we see on these kids here.
By the way, but not specifically gendered Halloween masks. I appreciate it. You got a skull, you got a witch, you got a pumpkin. Like those are your Halloween icons.
Absolutely.
So making these 3 masks, and they've stolen or acquired Stonehenge, the monument, and they're using pieces of Stonehenge to combine with circuitry to put them into the mask.
They basically have computer chips in the back of the masks.
Yeah, so that when a child puts the mask on and watches the Silver Shamrock commercial at 9 p.m. on Halloween night, their head is transformed into bugs, which then crawl out and also possibly releases a gas you don't see, or something else happens that kills other people near where this kid's head transforms.
Because these kids
they're also building androids. John, slow down. You missed the android plot, where the Silver Shamrock Company is also for some reason building androids.
You can see those guys at the bottom here on the Blu-ray cover, the androids. And when that first android head comes off,
replaces the main protagonist's character's wife with an android, which then he fights at the end of the movie.
I'm so glad you mentioned the main protagonist, because one of my favorite parts of this movie is Tom Atkins is the star of this movie. Tom Atkins, who is sort of a beer-bellied, middle-aged, who's just kind of a deadbeat scumbag dad. Yeah, he's not. There's nothing heroic about him. He's kind of terrible, actually.
Schlubby. He's kind of just some dude.
He's schlubby. He's drunk. He's an absentee father, and this is the guy who's got to stop this insane cult, led by another wild performance from Dan O'Herlihy, who plays the leader of the cult. Who
he is excellent. He is so good. He's the bad guy in RoboCop, and he's the bad guy here. I'm not entirely sure what his corporate model is here, but still,
evil.
Evil, I guess. I don't know what the profit in evil is.
He
but
takes a Bond villain plan to a whole other level.
Yeah, where it's do your shareholders know about this? What are we doing here? And I like that the movie is he has Stonehenge. Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. It's you're going to run these commercials. Won't kids be out trick-or-treating on Halloween? Are they all home by 9?
The other thing that's insane is this is a global plan, or at least countrywide, that doesn't take into account time zones.
Yeah. So you're going to hit some of either you're doing it at 9 and other kids, it's midnight and they're not up. Or you're doing it at 9 and it's 6. And people are I got home from school an hour ago. What's happening?
The movie doesn't, the movie
this is
doesn't
the kind
have
of evil businessman who, when he says, "Don't worry, the board has been dissolved," what just happened to involved acid.
There you go.
It does.
But it's bonkers.
It's so wild, but it stands out as they were doing something. At least there's a passion to it. Whereas when you get to Halloween 4 and 5, it's really getting pretty rude. 4 has interesting ideas that 5 immediately abandons.
I completely forgot Halloween 5, and I just watched it 6 days ago, and I couldn't tell you anything about it.
Yeah, that's the one. Well, because in 4 and 5, they tried to make the protagonist Laurie's daughter, so it's a little girl who's the protagonist.
By the way, that
Laurie
kid
has
was
died off screen. Yeah,
and she didn't get to be. She was I thought I was going to be stabbing people. It's
Daniel Harris,
fun. And it's sorry, kid. She's
I thought she's really good. She's surprisingly good as a kid, and she's still an actress to this day. She actually goes on to be in the Rob Zombie Halloweens, which is interesting.
Talk about that.
Well, the Rob Zombie Halloweens are. Look, my entire review for the Rob Zombie Halloweens is just. Do you like Rob Zombie movies? If you do, you'll probably like them.
Do you like disgusting hillbillies and homophobia?
Yeah.
Because if you do, Rob Zombie movies are the way to go.
Yeah.
Do you like excessive gore that then gets turned up way too much for the guy talking about faces getting ripped off? Is that's too much gore?
But 4 and 5. And then I do want to briefly talk about Halloween 6, The Curse of
Paul Rudd. Oh, I'm sorry. The Curse of Michael Myers.
The screen debut of Paul Stephen Rudd, as he's credited in the movie. Little baby face Ant-Man's in there.
Oh, he's so bad in it. He's such he is so not Paul Rudd because your best bet with your Paul Rudd is to just let Paul Rudd be charming and kind of funny and not a creep. Yeah. And this one is Give Paul Rudd extremely specific dialogue and then go, okay, I want you to say this very unnaturally, and I want you to say it in a way that makes you seem kind of ominous, even though you're really supposed to be the protagonist. So
yeah, he is essentially the hero.
I was there when Michael Myers killed some people. I was the child of the babysitter who was babysitter.
Yes. And it's like that's how he says it. And it's like as clunky as I just did it, he'll be, and there's a lot of this.
I was where Michael Myers was when he was killing people.
And it's like, stop doing that with your eyebrows. It's fucking distracting. Cut it out.
It's so weird because the movie he makes after that is Clueless.
Yes,
it's very charming and funny. It's clearly he was directed and then they chose takes to make that performance, because you're like, oh no, it's not like, oh, he hadn't learned to be a charming leading man yet. He clearly does it the same year in another movie.
Yes, it's so bad. And there's one part of the movie where at the end he's trying to break open a door with like a fire extinguisher or something, and he's like hitting the doorknob, and he does this, he's like bashing it, and he looks at the monster, and he's like, or looks at, I guess it's obviously it's Michael Myers, because we weren't gonna do anything interesting like with Halloween 3. So he looks over and he's like, yeah. And I'm like, there's your fun, Paul Rudd. Now just do that and have it be the movie.
Rudd-esque moment in the movie. Yeah. You also, the other thing that really colors that movie is the obviously dying Donald Pleasance, who did die while the movie was in production.
Yeah. We had to edit the movie to bejesus and back.
Yeah. Because Donald Pleasance, man, I mean, that dude knew where his money was, because he came back in all of those except 3 up till 6, where he literally died making a Halloween movie.
I do like that that movie, he has Donald Pleasance's character has this friend who's this old man. And it's like, you're clearly the villain guy who is Donald Pleasance's old man friend.
My favorite thing about it is that old man is retiring as the director of Smith's Grove Sanitarium, which is where Michael Myers was in prison. And he goes, I'm retiring and I want you to take over. You, who's even older than me, and is like, I don't know. Maybe I'll come back to work.
Oh my God. Okay, so Halloween 6, there's a scene where there's a character who's oh my God, where do we? Okay, so Donald Pleasance's old
What's
man.
What's great is I haven't seen any of these films, so I'm just along for the ride.
So Donald Pleasance's old man friend, whose name I forgot, is the head of this Thorn cult, or this cult of Thorn. And Thorn
this was the first attempt to get all this stuff to fit together, all these sequels.
Okay, so the Thorn cult has been going on since movie 4, where the Thorn cult is like, there's an evil demon presence that inhabits a person, Michael Myers, which compels him to kill his family members. Laurie Strode.
You might like this, Gorgoni, actually. It's pretty
Laurie
loopy
Strode does
fantasy
not know
shit.
that she is related to Michael Myers in the first movie. She's just like, I don't know why this is happening. By the way, that would have made a lot more sense to start weaving that in, in the third movie about a cult that is like doing witchy evil stuff. You'd think it would start there. It doesn't. So the Thorn cult's goal is to stop plagues, there isn't a plague, and droughts, there isn't a drought, by having this happen. So it's like, well, we as an audience see that the thing you're talking about doesn't exist. So then it's kind of not brought up in episodes 4 and 5. And then in episode 6, they just forget it's a thing. And then they're like, well, we kidnapped this girl and she's got to be impregnated with Michael Myers' seed.
Let's not ask about how that's going to happen.
But then it's like she escapes that place and she calls a talk show radio, like a call-in show. Like
it's a sign of the time.
Donald Pleasance is listening, which he is.
And he is. Well, and the talk radio show, it's a sign of the time, is a very Howard Stern-esque guy, right? Who is an insane character in that movie. And it is hilarious that Donald Pleasance just happens to be listening to this raunchy late night radio host.
He's so
old British dude.
There's no way that would be Howard Stern's audience. Is like, no. It's like if Mitch McConnell was watching like the Man Show. You're like, what is we doing? What is this?
Yeah, this 80-year-old British psychologist is just in his home going, oh, I love his antics.
And it's like responding to stuff. It's like, well, Donald Pleasance is no longer it's like, hey, I'm still alive. It's like, stop.
Yeah, maybe he's only tuning in because they're talking about Dr. Loomis for some reason.
I guess
it's every bad horror franchise needs
before the internet. So how we know?
narrative just to get it across in the film. Convenient
Anyway.
television and radio broadcast.
They leave all those plot threads dangling. And the movie is just like, well, Michael Myers died, I guess, or something.
Yeah.
Credits.
Well, because then in Halloween H2O, the 7th movie, they ignore all of that and try to reboot the thing with Jamie Lee Curtis back, having faked her death. And for some reason, she's the headmistress of a school in Northern California.
By the way, I will buy that you could just bounce in like 1980 and move to a new state and just be a new person like that.
Oh yeah, yeah.
There's no LinkedIn
Easily.
at this point. Like, fine.
Yeah.
The ending where she beheads Michael Myers with an axe, and
Not
then
bad.
the second movie, it's like Halloween Resurrection. It's like, oh no, it wasn't Michael Myers. Michael Myers disrobed and got fully nude at some point off screen.
Hey, he also drives cross
dressed a
country at one
guy
point in that
who
movie
looked-
too, which
Who looked I guess was Michael Myers' same size in the jumpsuit and also the head, but then crushed his larynx so he couldn't go.
the worst
hey, it's
mask,
me,
by the way,
not Michael
H2O.
Myers. I'm sorry, the mask.
Oh, it's so bad.
Yeah.
I'm just looking at
And
pictures
then,
of it right now, actually.
And then,
The
so
mask
he
is terrible.
at some point dressed up another human being as himself in his own costume, and then I guess just running around maskless and nude. Let's not forget the nude part. And then that person for some reason also had beef with Jamie Lee Curtis and wanted to kill her, and so Jamie Lee Curtis killed him instead of Michael Myers, who is still definitely
meanwhile,
alive.
Well, because he then goes to return to his childhood home where they just happen to be filming a reality show where a bunch
Busta
of
Rhymes is the producer director.
Yeah, Busta Rhymes, the producer director, and a bunch of sexy co-eds have to spend the night in Michael Myers' home. But what's this? The real Michael. By the way, Gergoni, I know a big screen debut of Katie Sackhoff.
I was about to say, I'm looking at the cast list
Resurrection.
of Halloween Resurrection. I was like, oh, baby Katie Sackhoff was in this movie.
She's the wild girl who breaks away to have sex and, of course, gets murdered.
Oh, no,
That
you can't
movie
do
was
that. That's
made
how you die.
At the high point of like, hey, reality TV show, this could be a thing. But like they didn't know how to film it yet. So they just give all the actors like little cameras and they're like, hey, I know I want to watch a TV show where I'm just constantly moving the camera around, right? This is like how you film things. And it's like, stop.
It is so aggressively of its time.
Yeah.
Then
at one point, like Busta Rhymes dresses up like Michael Myers and then beats Michael Myers and then verbally dresses him down because he is the director producer and is like, you're not supposed to be in this scene. I'm the one who's dressing up like Michael Myers. And Michael Myers just goes like this. And then just leaves.
Well, that's all he ever.
Okay.
I guess I've been told.
All right, he just goes outside, and then he just
Michael Myers is very respectful of boundaries, I guess.
Yeah. And Laurie Strode, have you tried just talking to this dude? Just go away.
That also does give us the great one-liner, though, of trick or treat, motherfucker.
Yeah.
He says before karate kicking Michael Myers. For some reason, Busta Rhymes' character knows karate and throws down with Michael Myers at the end of that movie. It's a wild franchise. It's a wild.
Then he gets the Michael Myers. Then gets caught in some loose wires and is killed by just a fire that's happening.
Yeah, except he's not because he pops back up in the morgue at the end of the movie.
Right.
And credits roll.
But then we were not going to do a sequel to that, so no.
No, because then it goes to Zombie for his 2 movies, which 1 is Zombie and 2 is really weird. Rob Zombie's Halloween 2 is so weird.
The mask in Halloween 2 doesn't. Okay, the mask in Rob Zombie's Halloween 2, doesn't look like a mask. It looks like a slightly burned human face, but it's not bulky like the mask Michael Myers wears isn't like tight to his face, so it's got some like almost a bucket quality to it. This doesn't have that. It's very tight to the face, and it looks like just a regular face. It almost looks like Leatherface, kind of. From
it does.
Movies.
It does
but
have a similar look to that.
It's the Rob Zombie ones. If you like Rob Zombie, it's full of like gross characters that you hate, and hillbillies, and like it's aggressive homophobia, and
very Rob Zombie. Yeah,
and it's like if you're into that,
yeah.
And it's 40. The first one is 45 minutes of us hanging around with Michael Myers as a kid.
Yeah, it's a full hour before you get to Laurie Strode in that movie.
You could maybe give me less of that because this is a 2-hour movie.
So,
Well,
Chris, what I'm hearing from you is maybe don't watch any of these movies, barring the most recent ones or the first one, and maybe Season of the Witch if I'm feeling saucy.
If you've never seen a horror movie, Halloween 1978. If you have seen a horror movie, the Halloween 2018, not to be confused with Halloween or Halloween.
Got it.
But that Halloween, you can kind of just infer that at some point a teenage girl was chased around by a guy in a mask.
Sure.
Yeah.
Done. That's the 2018 one. Then you know what? If you're feeling fun, you want to go see Halloween Kills. I haven't seen it yet, but my brain is too full of Paul Rudd and masks.
I have my
small child dressed as a clown.
I just bought my ticket today for a screening tomorrow, so I'm going to Halloween Kills.
And I've got my free trial of Peacock already signed up.
You can summit that mountain, but I'm going to rest at the base camp on this one. I think I've kicked.
You did more than anyone should have to with this franchise, Chris, and I applaud you for it. You are a hero of this website.
If you want to see something, but Mike, I would say if you do want to see something goofy and stupid, that's also like, well, I didn't see that coming. Halloween 3. It's Black Mirror.
You can borrow it from me because I have the Shout Factory.
You've tried to foist it on me on the way out the door from your apartment before.
I do that to a lot of people. I keep just a stack of these by the door and slip them into everyone's bag.
Hand them out like goodie bags.
Yeah, this is what I give to kids who trick or treat. By the way, I don't give them candy. I just give them copies of Halloween 3.
Teach them a lesson.
But actually, it's my favorite of the series doesn't make it good.
No, I don't. It's not good, but there's something hypnotic about it. It's so fascinating to me.
I do like that Silver Shamrock jingle.
Yeah,
that Silver Shamrock jingle is very
3 more days
infectious.
to Halloween. Like you'll just hear that forever after you watch it. So,
it's cute.
So yeah, what better way to wrap that show up than with that exhaustive recounting of the Halloween franchise? Guys, I want to thank you for joining me this week on the Weekly Rewind. Of course, you can check out comicbookcurious.com. We have new articles showing up every day, Monday through Friday, over there. And there you go. Mike's indicating the logo of Comic Book Curious. And Chris, of course, they can check you out on Twitch, streaming games. We do that twice a week.
I do Magic the Gathering Mondays where I do some deck construction stuff, and I do that walking through people through like techniques and things like that, and then testing some decks. This week I think we'll do zombies this week because I'm also going to be writing an article. Games Worth Playing is another article that I write. So we're doing Left 4 Dead. So we'll do the Left 4 Dead series.
Nice.
And I do Divinity 2 with Zamboni Lass, who's another writer here at Comic Book Curious. We're doing that on Mondays. I also do Friday the 13th. This week I do some You Get to Pick the Character, and I will play as that character.
Even
Very fun.
the ones that are not easy to play as.
Chad.
It's Chad. We all know it's going to be Chad.
And then Fridays I do a I'm sorry, Zamboni Lass is a player, not a writer. She's also a streamer.
Makes it very clear she does not
very clear
right.
Right. On Fridays, I also do kind of like a grab bag. I've been doing some Friday the 13th on Fridays as well. Been playing as Jessica, going around and smacking people in the back with a baseball bat instead of bothering to escape, which has led to some hilarious instances where Jason just gave up chasing me. They're like, it's too annoying. I'm not gonna chase him anymore. I'm like, I win. It's like your apathy is what the victory is. So,
that's the first. They don't do that in any of the movies. Maybe for this 13th one, Jason just gives up out of annoyance.
Just annoy Jason by like breaking into his shack, stealing his sweater, and then laying down a series of traps behind doors just to be like, oh no, I'm in here. And he steps in the trap and it's like, they run to the next house. It's like, surely I didn't trap this one.
My main thing is killing teenagers, but even I don't have the energy.
This one guy, it's one player. I'm not trying to escape.
I'm just taking my machete and going home.
Well, that way everybody else can like repair stuff around the camp.
Yeah, there you go. And Mike, you'll soon be on Twitch as well doing a D&D game, right?
Yes, indeed. Just a few scant weeks from now, we'll be starting up a Twitch live stream D&D game if you're into that sort of thing. I will be DMing. Chris will be one of my stalwart adventurers, and we will see what wilds take us. I think it is going to be a good time.
Absolutely. And I believe the plan is starting this Wednesday. Your podcast will be part of the Comic Book Curious Network. Material Components, new episode every Wednesday. And we'll have the entire back catalog on the website and on our RSS feed. So if you want to go back and start from the start, you can, or you can just join right in.
Don't necessarily recommend that. If you have a lot of time to kill, sure. But the first season is definitely a big, sprawling 5th edition D&D campaign, 4.5, 5-hour episodes sometimes, and it is an endeavor. The second season, which we are approaching the 40th episode of here pretty soon, I think 33 is coming out soon due to the podcast time travel. I'm not 100% sure.
That actually, Mike, I can confirm that is correct.
Okay, well, there we go. Then the second season is much more manageable and is set in a science fantasy universe of my own devising, and uses speaking of homebrew, a totally new tabletop RPG system that I designed for this season that we are using to explore this setting where magic is technology, and how does that look like in a kind of Star Trek-y sci-fi kind of setting when you get into space and everyone has fireballs and laser beams.
Yeah.
Damn it, that should be the name of the setting. Holy crap.
Fireballs and laser beams?
Yeah. So, be sure to subscribe to that, as well as the official Comic Book Curious podcast. And 2 other shows will also be launching next week are ones I host, one's called Campbell and Jones Meet the Monsters, which is myself and one of our other writers, Brendan Jones. We're going to be watching through all the classic monsters, your Frankensteins, your Draculas, your Wolfmans, mummies, and Phantoms of the Operas. And we'll start with the Universal era, move to Hammer, and so forth, like that through time. And also the Action Shelf, which is a show I do with another podcaster, Michael Listman, who's also on Material Components. And that is a show where we do reviews of all those action movies you see in the red boxes and things like that star your Bruce Willis, the Stone Cold Steve Austin, Steven Seagal, all those movies that you're like, what, those exist? Yes, those are the movies we're watching and dissecting. It's a very silly show that comes out on Fridays, so check that out. Chris, we'll have to have you on there to do one of those with us.
I've seen some of the WWE, WWF films.
Yeah. If it's almost a film, it's on the Action Shelf.
Tagline.
Yeah. So you can check all that out. And if you're just wanting to make that easy on yourself, you can actually just subscribe to a Comic Book Curious feed that has every show from our network, and they'll come to you. So you can get every episode of the show if you want. So lots of ways to check that out. And I'll be back here next Saturday for another episode of the Weekly Rewind. But I want to thank you, our viewers, for listening, and those who commented in the chat. But that's going to wrap up this week's episode of the Weekly Rewind. Stay curious, everybody.